All right, as the title implies, we're going to cover some basics and some tips and tricks for getting in Diablo 4. We'll start with options. Pull up our options. We go over to gameplay. This option here, Advanced Tooltip Compare and Advanced Tooltip Information, we want to check both of these. These allow us to have information on our tooltips. Pull up my character. If we look here, you can see the damage ranges, all the ranges for all the affixes all show up here and allow us to see where we rolled in that range. So the other thing this does is it allows us to hit shift when we're looking at a piece of gear, and we can compare things on both items. We can see what we're gaining and what we're losing. The other thing we want to look at in the options, and some of these are preference, monster health bar options. If you want it to be easier to see what things are enemies on your screen and what things aren't, always on can be helpful. Always off will give you more of an immersive take on the game. And hover only, I believe, is only when your cursor is over a specific enemy that it will give you a health bar. The other thing we can do is display player highlight. If you want to make it easier to see where you specifically are, especially if you're playing with friends, this could be helpful, and then you can change the player highlight color right here. All right, the other thing we want to look at is over here in controls. You scroll down from the top to right here under gameplay. If this is selected, then you'll have one option for a hotkey that combines this basic skill slot, your move, and your interact, and or this. It'll combine it all into one. If we deselect this, this allows us to assign the basic skill slot itself, so what we actually want the ability to be, separate from our move key or our move and interact together. I prefer move and interact together to be on left click. This allows me to left click without it trying to cast any abilities. I can interact with things without it trying to cast any abilities. And instead, only when I want to cast things, it can go here. Game progression and difficulty. Let's take a look. So when you go through the campaign, you're going to be either in World Tier 1 or World Tier 2. Those are the only two you're going to have access to. Difference being enemies have more health, do more damage, you get a little bit more experience, a little bit more gold, drop more items. I think it's around 15% more items. It's going to be dealer's choice on which you choose, whether you want just the easier, quicker route, or whether you want things to be more of a challenge, but take a little bit longer to accomplish. Once you've gotten through the campaign and you think you are up to par to take on your first capstone dungeon, it's going to be located right here in Kiovashad. This dungeon is always level 50. It does not scale up or down with your level, meaning that you can be underleveled or overleveled, depending on when you want to attempt it. Once you have completed this capstone dungeon, you'll then be able to come to the statue, and you'll have the option to unlock Nightmare difficulty, World Tier 3. In World Tier 3, you gain access to having sacred items drop. You can start doing Nightmare dungeons, Helltides, and the champions is kind of negligible. These also increase. Obviously, things get more health, deal more damage. You get a lot more experience. You get a little more gold. And the monsters deal a little bit more damage to resistances. Once you've geared yourself out in Sacred and you've leveled to what you feel is adequate to take on the next Keystone Dungeon. I guess I have to select here. Obviously, you'll need to be in Nightmare difficulty. This is going to be your next and final Keystone Dungeon for unlocking difficulties. It does not scale up or down from level 70, so wherever you fall in reference to that is where you're going to be. Once you have completed this one, then you will be able to unlock Torment difficulty, World Tier 4. In World Tier 4, ancestral items can now drop. Mobs get harder, you get more experience, you get the same amount of gold, and they overcome a little bit more of the resistances. World Tier 4 is where you will typically want to play most of the game towards the later end. The next thing we want to take a look at is your map and your region completion specifically. So if you pull up your map, you can see up here at the top, it'll tell you your region completion information, and press W for the rewards. If we press that, pull up this. This is each of the regions that we have. And this is the things we gain from completing it as we go. Down below, you'll see how many of the different things there are in it and what value you get out of each of these items that you complete that will go towards your region completion. Personally, I've found, as I've done them all, I found the most valuable things to complete first are going to be your Altars of Lilith, which is going to give you account-wide buffs to your characters if you haven't already done it. Followed by Strongholds, because they give the most bang for your buck in terms of points for work done, and waypoints. They give you a good value, but also waypoints help you traverse the world much, much easier. After that, it's mainly side quests and dungeons. The area completion you can do as you go. I would prioritize personally side quests over side dungeons. The reason for this is because there are a number of side quests that will have you go into a side dungeon. First in-game activity that you could take part in if you wanted to would be just going around doing regular dungeons. It's going to give you some XP, it's going to give you mob density that you may not find in the open world, etc. Obviously, you could go and unlock legendary aspects that you don't already have. Another thing that you can do is things for the Tree of Whispers. I won't go into big details so I don't spoil anything, but you'll find them with these pink and red markers all around the world. So there's some up here, etc. And if you mouse over them, you can see what they give you, how many Grim Favors, when they expire. Dungeons will always give you 5. Some of these will give you 3. Some of these will only give you 1. See down here at the bottom, this is your Grim Favors. Once you have all 10, you can then go to the tree and turn them in. Get a container satchel that you can open for some chances at loot. I don't tend to focus these, more of just do them as I'm doing other things and turn them in whenever they're full. One thing to note is that whether you are or are not focusing them, if you overflow, so say I only had 2 slots left and I went and did this dungeon, which gave me 5, it would fill up and I would need to go to the tree. But the extra 3 remaining would get added on to the next set to do. So you don't need to try and micromanage it down to where you're filling it up exactly. Anything over will just get added on to the next one. Helltides. You'll see them marked by these markers right here. It'll usually cover 2 zones. See all the areas in red? That's covered in Helltide. So during Helltide, go around and you pick up these. You see the icon up here by the mini-map, these cinders, which you can get from killing mobs. Get them from opening chests. The other thing, you can get them from the interactables in the world. I most notably find the ones that are glowing red like this to have the better chance of dropping multiple cinders, whereas the other ones can just drop individuals. So these are the cinders that you're looking for. As you pick them up, they get allocated up here. One thing to note is that when this particular Helltide ends, all of the cinders that you have not spent will go away. They will not retain over towards the next Helltide that you encounter. Now, the thing that you're wanting to do with these is going to zoom in a little bit, and you can see these chests that are marked. So ones that say jewelry will either say amulet or rings, depending when you get close enough to actually see them. It's another jewelry. Protection is any part of armor, and then there's weaponry, which is light for one-hand weapons and heavy for two-hand weapons. You can see here, this one is an amulet one. Now, the cost to open the chest is going to depend on what slot it is that the chest is giving you. So this one is giving amulet, so it's 125. All amulet chests will always cost this 125. The only other chests that you don't see on the map just by looking around like this are mystery ones. We'll talk about a resource that you can use that will show where the mystery ones can be found at any given time. The other thing that it gives you is materials. So you're going to get Fiend Roses. You'll also find the Fiend Roses in the world as interactables like the other plants. And Forgotten Souls. These you can get out of certain mining nodes. And then these materials drop off of like the mini boss mobs that you can get them from some events sometimes. And you'll get some out of these chests. These are needed for upgrading and changing your gear and such. So that's one of the main reasons to do Helltide, other than just killing mobs to get regular drops and whatnot. The other material-driven in-game activity is world bosses. Now they'll show up, have this icon with a timer. The timer will tell you how long. These won't show up until 30 minutes prior to the boss starting. But if you're there when it starts, you get to fight the boss. It tells you what your rewards are. The weekly bonus is once per week per character. The expires in is basically when it resets and you can do it again. Now, other than the random loot that you get and then the loot that you get out of the spoils cache, the other thing that you're getting out of this is, take a look down here in materials, scattered prisms. These are required in order to add sockets to items that do not already have a socket. Another in-game activity that we have available is Legion events. This icon here, they'll show up in a zone. It's one of these smaller zones, but not just the open arenas like the bosses. If you mouse over, you'll be able to see when it begins. Basically, a Legion event is there are lots of groups of mobs, big groups of mobs that will spawn over and over again in various places in this zone, and you and the other players present will run around and kill all of them. The mobs themselves will not drop loot. However, at the end of the event, it will drop loot. I think it's probably a decent way to get experience based on the number of mobs that spawn and the frequency at which they spawn. Next, let's take a look at Nightmare Dungeons. This is an in-game activity that I think many people will spend a lot of time interacting with. It starts in World Tier 3, and most of it takes place in World Tier 4. In order to go into a Nightmare Dungeon, you need to activate a Nightmare Sigil, like this one here. If we look at the tooltip for one, we can see at the top what dungeon it is, Betrayer's Row. It is an Ancestral Nightmare Sigil, which just means that it needs to be done in World Tier 4. Sacred Nightmare Sigils can be done in World Tier 3. What tier it is, this is going to dictate the level of the mobs that you're going to encounter. It'll be 54 plus whatever tier it is. So at tier 46, the mobs will be level 100. Below that, you'll see again, it's Betrayer's Row. It'll tell you what zone it's located in, or what region. Dry steps, and how many revives are allowed. Sacred sigils will be 12 revives, and ancestral ones will be 4. Below that, we have the Dungeon Affixes. This is where you will determine whether the particular sigil you're looking at is doable for your build or your party's build if you're in a group. The top one will be a beneficial. A lot of times it will be some form of dealing a bonus damage type. Sometimes it will be bonus gold. Sometimes it will be increased thorns damage. The next one down is the most notable one, where you will either get a special one or an enhancement to the elites. So you'll have to make a decision for yourself which ones you do and you do not like to run with, and use that to help filter what sigils you use. Below that is going to be some form of damage increase or additional damage that the mobs are going to do. The one below that is going to be something impacting your ability to kill the mobs. Either they will have an increased health, or they'll have barrier on top of their health, or they will take less of a specific type of damage. The last one is kind of potluck. This one in particular is they take even less damage from overpower attacks. Sometimes it'll be something like ranged attacks will decrease your chance to dodge or your armor or burn resources, that type of thing. There's also one in there that will deactivate your potion from being able to be used for 2 seconds. So in general, you need to read the tooltips carefully to make sure that your particular build and how it needs to work is not countered by the sigil itself. Once you go to use one, you can simply right click. Let me find one that I don't care to get rid of. Actually, I won't run this one. I don't run Stormbane's Wrath. So if we right click, it'll pop up asking you to accept. If you're in a group, once you say yes, it will then show group members having decided yes or no, and the dungeon will not start until everybody in your party has selected yes. So we say yes, it'll say that it starts. If you pop up your map quick enough, like soon enough after activating the sigil, it will auto center on the dungeon itself. If it has been a little bit of time, then it won't auto center and you'll need to zoom out and find the dungeon itself to go there. To travel to the dungeon, the easiest way is simply to find where it is, left click, it'll ask if you want to go. You say yes, and then it will teleport you to directly outside of that dungeon. You complete a Nightmare Dungeon, this is what you're going to end up with. You have your invincibility bubble and an awakened glyph stone. Inside you'll find the glyphs that you have available that you can select in order to allocate the XP that you gained during the run. I've already allocated this one, but if we look here, how much you gain is going to be based on the tier of the Nightmare Dungeon that you do. As you allocate, the other thing to note is that if it is going to finish the level and level up the glyph, it will only allocate that much XP, and then you'll have the rest of it remaining to allocate to the same glyph if you want to continue to put it on that one, or a different glyph. That way you're not wasting any of the XP if you're specifically farming glyphs up to, say, level 15 each, just to unlock the larger range. This currency down here in the bottom center of your character screen, Murmuring Obols, I think that's how it's pronounced. These are basically blood shards from Diablo 3. Find one of these, Purveyor of Curiosities, on the minimap. Oh, let me move off of his icon. On the minimap, it looks like this. Find them in all the major cities. Come and you interact with them. These will allow you to get a random item of a specific slot for a specific value. I'm going to cover a couple handy website tools for playing Diablo 4. First one is Helltides.com, which is going to bring up a site that will show you when the world boss is going to be, when the Helltide is, or if it's active, how long, and when the next Legion is going to be. It'll also show you the area that it's going to be in. These little orange circles are where events tend to spawn. And the chests that it shows here are the mystery chests. Now, if it has the little green circle, if you click on it, you can see positive and negative. This is basically people can verify that this is in fact where the mystery chest is currently located. So if you're specifically going for them, this is the easy way to figure out where they are and when they're active. The other website that we're going to look at is Diablo 4 Interactive Map. Here's the link, mapgenie.io/Diablo-4/maps/sanctuary. This is how it's going to load by default. Normally what I do is I go over here to hide all. The site can be very handy for finding specific things that you're trying to complete, especially if you're trying to get your region completions done. For example, strongholds, waypoints, altars of Lilith. These allow you to go in and see where they are and go and knock them out, get them done. The way that I did it personally is I went through and I'd complete, a zone at a time. That way I could keep track of which ones I already had done and which ones I hadn't. Here's side quests, which could also be handy. I didn't personally use the side quest one, but I could see its value.